Hey, it's 3.2 Organization and Presentation, all about Criterion C. And in this lesson, students will be able to add a works cited page, an opening, an ending, and transitions to their higher level essay. So let's take a look. We're focusing on this question: how do I organize and present my higher level essay? And, I've got two images. I've got SpongeBob and a kitty. All right. So I made this graphic to help you see the basic design for essays. And you've probably seen something like this before. The introduction paragraph we oftentimes talk about as an upside down triangle because the opening, the hook, should be somewhat large. It should be wide enough, in a sense, so that anyone reading the essay can relate. And then through the background information, and then finally the thesis statement, we narrow the topic to that point, that argumentative point, in this case with an argumentative essay, that makes a claim about how a certain literary aspect creates meaning in the text that you're analyzing. And then after we write this intro paragraph, we write the body paragraphs, right? And each body paragraph can be represented as kind of a square within this framework. And you start by making a claim that supports your thesis. And then you argue your claim by analyzing and evaluating several textual examples as support. And these are some tips. You want to make sure that you do transition at the end of each body paragraph to the next paragraph. And then finally, we have the concluding paragraph, which is like a right side up triangle, because we start with that point, that thesis restated. And then you just briefly sum up what you've said and leave the reader with something interesting to think about. All right, so that graphic is in your packet, so don't feel like you need to write it down. And I hope that it's helpful to you. Sometimes it's nice to see a visual. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how you're going to be scored on Criterion C. First of all, you've already been scored on integrating quotes, which is half of Criterion C, but the new stuff is in yellow. This is how well organized, focused, and developed is the presentation of ideas in the essay, and you can see the differences between a 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And what we want to shoot for is this: the essay is effectively organized and cohesive. The line of inquiry is well developed. All right, so let's talk about introductory paragraphs first. What are some key tips for a good opening? You'll want to try to start with a creative hook. And the fact that it's creative just means that you've come up with it on your own. It shouldn't be creative like a short story kind of hook. And you want to avoid the old kind of hooks that you wrote when you were first learning how to write essays. Instead, we're going to keep it really academic sounding throughout, even with that first sentence. Keep that hook short. In between the hook and the thesis statement, that's when you have the general background. And it's going to be whatever information is needed in order for your reader to move from your general hook to your very specific thesis statement and understand what it is you're arguing. One idea here for the opening and the background information is to focus on the central concept that connects to your line of inquiry. This is a tip that comes directly from IB. And if you remember the central concepts, we talked about them briefly a long time ago when we started talking about the higher level essay. Here they are again. We've got creativity, and you're thinking about these questions when you look at creativity: perspective, culture, transformation, identity, representation, and communication. So which one seems to fit the best with what you are looking at in your higher level essay? After you've determined which one it is, you could do some writing about this central concept right in the intro paragraph to show the IB examiner that, yes, you've given the 7 central concepts for IB some thought, and one of them does directly relate to your question, your line of inquiry, and the argument that you've based that line of inquiry on. All right, so what to avoid in this opening? Don't ask a question. I know that you've done that before and it worked, but it's really not appropriate in an academic literary essay to ask a question, especially the reading rainbow, have you ever wondered kind of question. We're going to leave those behind now. Don't get too lengthy with your philosophical reflection. If you wanted to make a philosophical reflection, that's fine, but keep it brief and directly related to the topics in your essay. And anything too informal, you don't ever want to say, hey, examiners, my name's Michelle, and I'm here to talk to you about this play I read. All right. Here is a sample hook from one of your colleagues, a classmate of yours. They started with, the stories told and the things they carried are works of fiction, yet some are proclaimed to be truer than if they actually happened. This is an interesting creative statement that relates directly to the book and the topics at hand. Their background information that followed the hook read like this. The stories surround a platoon of American soldiers in the midst of the Vietnam War, and yet there is seldom mention of the enemy, the Viet Cong. When the enemy is mentioned, it is minimal. The one time the main character, Tim, is wounded, he blames an inexperienced medic for his pain instead of the Viet Cong. The conflict in the story seems to be free from Vietnam in that it could take place in a different war around a similar time period and still have the same elements, the same meaning. This suggests that the American soldiers did not see the Vietnamese as their enemies and that the main conflict throughout the war was the internal conflict for deciding to participate in the war, which led to immense guilt. So that part connects the hook to the thesis statement. I'll show you the thesis statement now. It reads like this. In the novel, The Things They Carried, Tim O'Brien uses a changing and misleading narrator as a creative force to illustrate the guilt that was experienced by veterans in post-Vietnam America. All right, so the whole thing reads like this. We've got the hook here, the background information, and then the thesis statement at the end of the intro paragraph. All right, how about an ending? Well, the ending, in a sense, is a mirror of the opening. It starts this time with that thesis statement. You sum up your argument in just a sentence or two, and then you leave the reader with something interesting to think about and directly related to what you've been saying in your essay. It should be the shortest paragraph in your essay. I say you can write a good conclusion in 50 words. Here is a sample ending. Here's the thesis statement that's restated from the essay that we just looked at for the intro paragraph sample. In the novel, The Things They Carried, Tim O'Brien uses a changing and misleading narrator as a creative force to illustrate the guilt experienced by Vietnamese and post-Vietnam America. And then they go on to sum it up and leave us something interesting to think about by saying the narrator misleads the reader in order to distance himself from his own guilt and to point to the actions of the soldiers and their choice to go to war as being the main cause of the suffering they experience. The misleading narrator enhances the understanding of the events in a way that extracts the meaning and makes false stories truer than what occurred. So it looks very similar to the opening, and that is just fine. It kind of reads as in like the opposite order, right? Starting with the thesis statement and then leaving the reader something to think about at the end. Nice and short, just like I like it. All right, let's talk transitions. Transitions, when they work best, they are full sentences that connect the current idea to the next idea, and they typically are at the end of a body paragraph. They feel natural, not forced, and at first you can't even tell they're transitions because they fit so well that they are seamless. It's as if you cannot see where the seam is, where they have been stitched together, those two paragraphs. All right, so here's a sample. The student's body paragraph 1, their first claim is Tim O'Brien explores the theme of guilt by using the motif of weight, specifically in situations that involve grief. And here is their second body paragraph's claim. Tim O'Brien explores the theme of innocence by using the motif of weight to remove guilt. Okay, so we've got the two claims, and now we need a transition sentence in between that connects the two, and it would be in the end of that first body paragraph. And here's what they came up with. You cannot have one without the other. Innocence and guilt are codependent. So you can see that the transition incorporates aspects of the first claim, specifically guilt, and aspects of the second claim, specifically innocence. And so that works really well to end that first body paragraph and lead directly to the second body paragraph. All right, the works cited page. First of all, I've made some for you that you can copy. Yay! Thank you, Ms. Cope. You're welcome. I love ya. And they are in Schoology. If you're writing a book about a different text, or excuse me, if you're writing an essay about a different text, you'll have to make your own. Similarly, if you are using texts beyond just the play or the novel, you'll have to add those to your works cited page. A works cited page is a list of sources used in the essay, and it comes at the very end of your essay, and it should be on its own separate page titled Works Cited, and that Works Cited title will be in the center. It's center margined. The rest of it is double spaced. All of the entries in that Works Cited page, just like the rest of your essay. And you're going to use hanging indentation, which is really tricky to do if you have long entries. Now, our short entries, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of difference, but just to let you know that hanging indentation is what is expected, where the first line is flush with the left margin, and then each proceeding line is actually indented an inch. And so it works opposite to your regular paragraphs, which are indented and then not indented. And they're a little bit tricky to make using Google Docs. There also should be an alphabetical order if you have more than one entry. Most of you are just going to have your one entry. You're just going to have Medea. You're just going to have the things they carried. But if you have more than one, then you're going to alphabetize based on the first word of each entry. And if you do need to use, if you are citing a source other than Medea and the things they carried, then you'll have to use Noodle Tools or some other app that will help you format the citation correctly. All right, what else do I need to do to make sure that I am organizing this bad boy cohesively and showing that my line of inquiry is well developed? Well, ask yourself this question. Read each paragraph and say, how does this paragraph support my thesis statement? Read each line within each body paragraph and ask yourself, how does this paragraph support my thesis statement? Write concluding sentences for each body paragraph and then follow up those concluding sentences with transitions to the next paragraph. Try using the resources that are there for you. There are so many resources for you in Schoology, in your packet, and I hope that you'll go back and use them. Sometimes when you write the first draft, it's just kind of cranked out because you had to get it done. Well, now take the time to go back and look at some of those questions from the various study guides that were in your packets, or some of the articles that are linked in Schoology to help you really formulate your ideas clearly. Use an outside reader. Get somebody else to read it and ask them if it makes sense or where they get confused. Read the IB Sample A essay in 3.1 if you haven't done so yet. It is the Aspire to do in 3.1, but I really think it can be helpful for you to read another essay outside of the texts we've been writing about and see how it's organized to help you as you organize your revised higher level essay. And please ask me. I am here to help you. It's my job. It's what I get paid for. And guess what? I like to do it. Sometimes I look like I'm really busy, but I just need to be asked for help. Come on up and hang out with me. I might even have some candy in my red basket for you. And then finally, read, reread, and read some more. The best essays are written by tireless revisers. Good luck to you as you work on this. The mastery check is to submit your works cited page. Thanks.